And the magic you bring to the world, like, for you, Christine, the magic you bring to the world is the fullest expression of Christine, right? It's like all of us have one song that we bring to the world that no one else brings. But if we don't bring it, the world doesn't get to hear it.
Hi and welcome to Lead Well. This week's episode of the Lead Well podcast. And again, I have a wonderful guest with me, and that is James Robbins. Hi, James. Welcome.
Hi, Christine. Thanks for having me on your show.
Sure. So before we start the conversation, let me share a few things that I found out about you. So you are a leadership coach, a keynote speaker, and you have a new book coming up, which is called The Call to Climb. And we'll talk a bit about that because I already have read the first three chapters. So I'm very fortunate to have that. So you, James, began your career in ministry, where you learned the deep art of inspiring people without relying on authority. Just such an important thing to do, and a lesson that you later carried into the corporate world. You went on to found the first Ascent Leadership. I hope I said that correctly. And you spent the last 2 decades helping organizations turn managers into leaders that people want to follow, because I think we agree on that. You cannot become a leader. You have to be made to be a leader. So that's a wonderful thing here. And your first book, The 9 Minutes on Monday, became a go-to leadership guide. And now with The Call to Climb, you blend storytelling and soul work into a powerful new fable about purpose, fear, and answering the deeper call within. Now, you join us today to talk about burnout, where I just released an episode where I talked about my own burnout. So I'm really curious to hear your experience, and reinvention, because you're now here striving and thriving, and what it means to climb the right mountain in life and in leadership. So welcome again, James.
Thanks, Christine.
Great to have you. So to start us off, let me refer back to your book. You have a hero in the book, a protagonist called Riley. And the story starts off with Riley ending up in the Bolivian wilderness, lost there. And this is really the turning point. So what moment made you in your life realize that you can't keep going on the way you did?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for reading the first 3 chapters of the book, and it's just fun for me to talk about it. I only wish my story was as condensed as Riley's story, but I think the first times where I really began to struggle was wondering, like, why am I feeling depressed about the work I'm doing? Because I was in a very purposeful job, right? I was in ministry, and yet why am I not happy? And then, of course, I felt guilty for feeling not happy. I think a lot of people who have been in ministry or even not-for-profits can relate with that. And I just kept pushing through, right? Like, oh, obviously the problem is me. Like, just put your head down and keep working because this is your path. And what happened to me was I actually I came home from a road trip where I was working in multiple cities, and I came back home and I just felt this pain in my legs. And the next day I woke up and I could barely move. And I thought, oh, something's wrong with me. And it was really scary. And for the next 6 weeks, I could hardly get out of bed. And I went to doctors and they thought maybe I had lupus. They did all these tests. And after all these tests, they're like, no, like you have nothing, like you have nothing. And it was, I honestly thought like I wrecked my body or something. Like I couldn't understand it. And I remember some of those days I had to still get up and speak on stage, and I would just sit behind the stage while they waited for me, and I could barely get out of the chair. And reminds me of that book, when the body, no, not when the body says no, when the body keeps score. And it's like, to me, that final stage, like, okay, you're not going to listen to the nudges, then we're just going to stop you and get your attention.
Wow. Wow. And I know also in your book there is then the wise guide for Riley that's called Santiago, and he also makes reference to a map. So he says a lot of problems are avoided when you have the right map, but a lot of us have the wrong map, obviously. So what was your wrong map that you found out? How did you know that it was actually the wrong map? I guess not being able to get out of bed is is a bit of a hint there. What else is there?
Well, I think, and for those listening, what happens is the character, the book starts out, the character gets lost in the Bolivian foothills and winds up stumbling into this village. And it turns out Riley meets this person named Santiago, who, after talking with Santiago for a bit, you realize, this guy's more than just some person living in a village. And he begins to talk to Riley and makes that comment about, a lot of problems are solved when you have the right map. And I think that, obviously we understand the concept of having the correct map, but a lot of times it's not that we had the wrong map. It's that we had the map that was serving us at the time, but we outgrow it. Like we it no longer covers us for the new territory that we're going. So if you think, especially when we're younger, we have a map, right? Whether it's but it's largely drawn by your parents and your tribe from high school and just society, right? Like go get it, go to college, go to university. You got to go get a job. Get It's sort of mapped out for us. Well, and even especially when I was growing up, like the concept of follow your passions was, well, you don't do that. Like go and be responsible, right? That's the map you're supposed to follow. Well, at some point, like that's at some point, the soul or the psyche or the whatever word you want to use for your inner life, that deep, deep part of you that knows you better than you do and actually knows the path, and that part begins to protest. And whether that's through feelings of something's not right, or feelings of sadness, feelings of depression, maybe anxiety in your life, or you're just thinking, like, you could be sitting there in your car in traffic and just think, yeah, like, who am I? Like, what am I supposed to be doing with my life? Those moments, those are those nudgings to say, like, something's wrong with the map here that you're using, and there's a better map for you. And that's really the start of the call to climb, is realizing that the map that you're using, uh, it served you in the past, but now you've outgrown it.
And I also like the saying that the map is not the territory. So you think the map is reality, but it's not. It's just representation of some parts of it.
Yes, that's a good
Wow.
insight for sure.
Hmm. Wow. So you referenced the car, and I know in your book you also once said say the car felt like a coffin. So doesn't sound a lot of liveliness there. So what does aliveness feel like for you? How do you notice when you're drifting and when you're really alive and fully savoring life, I guess?
I like the quote by Dr. James Hollis, who says, when the path is right, the energy is there. And it doesn't mean when the path is right, it's easy, or when the path is right, there's no problems. But when the path is right, the energy is there. So if you are in your life or your career or whatever it might be, and the energy is just gone for you, right? And you find it really hard to muster up. And I'm not talking like, oh, you're tired or maybe you need a vacation. We all go through those moments. But when truly something is missing and you are not excited about what you're doing, right? You're not excited about your life, you're not excited about your future, and like I said, it can be incredibly difficult, but you're still excited about it. That's a sign that you're on the path. And you're I said before we started recording how insightful you are to pick up some of the things that I wrote into the book. And again, for those listening, what happens is Riley's car breaks down, and Riley has to make this decision, like, do I stay in this car all night? It's freezing cold. I might die. Or do I head off into the dark night, not knowing actually where I'm going to go? And Riley says, I probably should stay, but this car feels like a coffin. And of course, the idea there is that it seems the safest option is always to stay. Just stay where you are. But sometimes when you think about, if I stay here though, I am going to die. At least spiritually, right? At least that part of my heart that's just going to give up on my dreams.
Yeah, and I think it's so important, and I came to understand that there are really change is hard for people, and there are really only two reasons for us to change. It's either because we cannot stand it any longer, so that the pain, the coughing gets too small and makes us too anxious, or we have a big vision. But having a big vision is audacious. It not everybody has that, so I can totally relate to that. I'd rather be in my car as long as possible and only get out if I can. Wow, wonderful. Then you talk about the soul, and also the forces within us that oppose our soul. And I usually like to refer to voices, so that really try to tell me what to do and what not to do, and I like to actually bring them out of myself. So I always say there are some little figurines sitting on my shoulder, and whenever I do something that they feel is not right, they stand up and start whispering into my ear. So what are the voices that try to pull you off your true path?
I love how you personify the voices, as people standing on your shoulder. That's perfect. You know, we all think that we're in control of our lives, or we think we're running the show, but we're really not. I mean, most of our life is spent on autopilot, and so when you have that autopilot, it means that the programs are running, whatever the formative programming was that you had when you were young, but also even during your adult years. Maybe you've gone through some significant pains or traumas, and then those start to shape how you see the world and the decisions that you make. So when I think about to your question about what voices did I hear, or what some of my programming, if I go back to my years in ministry where I thought I'm not happy, but I want to do something else, some of the voices were internal, right? Like, well, you can't quit. A lot of people like what you do. A lot of people depend on you. At least that's what you convince yourself. A lot of people depend on you. You would be letting a lot of people down. What would you do after? Would you be successful? What would your parents think? And then there's the external voices where, like, I had one of my bosses tell me, like, you can't quit. Like, you can't quit this job. Only God can tell you when that's time. And I'm like, well, how's he going to do that, right? So at the same time, though, if you go back and if I went to back and dissected everything, everything will come down to one thing: that it was just fear. It's just fear. It's what keeps most of us from making a change, whether it's changing a job, changing relationship. We're just afraid of that unknown. And then the second question is, we're afraid that, will I be able to handle that? Which why everything comes back to how much you believe in yourself. Because the person that believes in themselves, they know that, okay, I don't know what I'm getting into. I'm going to leave the car and head out into the dark. But whatever happens, I will be okay. I will figure it out.
And fear often also prevents us from actually saying what we think or what we want or what we mean. So from speaking the truth. And I know that you also have a scene in your book where the protagonist is actually speaking his truth, but then he's so emotional, so afraid that he's all trembling all over. And what is it that we can do to stay present, to actually, yeah, thrive through those moments after we have found the courage to speak our truth, and still our nervous system wants us to run away because we feel we have done something wrong.
Yeah, I wish there was a magic pill, right? When those times come where you feel inspired to speak up, and it could be that your bosses yelling at someone in a rude way, in a mean way. You just feel like this is so wrong and you want to say something. Well, when we do get the courage up to say something, then often our voice, like our voice comes out and our breath is shallow and we sound like we're not confident. And, I've spoken on a lot of stages, Christine, like 3,000. And yet still in those moments, if I'm in some crowd and I feel like, no, I got to speak up, I'll still face that, right? That anxiety that comes up. And so much of that is just that formative programming of I don't want to be judged by the tribe, right? By the herd. And I think when it comes down to how do you handle that, number one is just know that that's a totally normal process, first of all. Doesn't mean something's wrong that you feel that. But really the second thing is to obviously breathe. It's one of the things that will help calm us down in those moments, which sends the message to that primal part of the brain that's freaking out to say, no, this is okay. Like we're going to be fine. And, then take that moment later and reflect on it and think, what was really going on for me? What was the belief that was driving that if I spoke up there, uh, what's the consequence? And because that's driven by some program, and I want to know what that is, because what I want is to live an intentional life. And here's the person I want to be. So we want to make sure that's clear, and so that we can keep taking steps toward that version of us.
So making really sure that I always align with my own values as well, and that I know them upfront,
Yeah,
which not
exactly.
everybody does.
Well, you haven't got to that part in the book yet because you only had 3 chapters. But one of the things that Santiago is going to help Riley do is to create a spiritual compass, a spiritual vision. Is this idea of getting really clear on what do you want? And a lot of people can't answer that question. They find it really difficult to answer, or they might say, well, what am I allowed to want? Or they might think, well, I know what I don't want, but I don't know what I want. And okay, that's all right, but it just means you've not spent enough time with that. Because a lot of times, what we want is in there. It's just all the layers of fears that keep that down. So we want to know what we want, and in that also is what we believe about life. So if you think about all the major roles you play, let's say you're a parent, and for me, I have adult children now that are all in college. Well, what do I believe about being a parent of adult children, and why do I believe that? So not what does my parents believe, what does the church down the road think, what is the no, what do I believe about parenting adult children, and why do I believe that? And then how do I want to be as a parent? Right? That's your spiritual compass. And as you start to get clear there, the more clear you get in all these areas, like as a friend, what do I believe about friendship? Why do I believe that? How am I going to show up as a friend? Once that's clear, now when you deviate, because the reason you're going to deviate is mostly going to be because of fears. Sometimes it's laziness, but it's mostly going to be fears. And then you can go, okay, identify that fear, but let me come back to my North Star. This is what I believe. And then the second part of that is, well, who am I? But the better question is, well, who am I deciding to be? Because our identities are shaped by everything around us. And part of growing up is taking the pens back from everyone who's been writing about who you're supposed to be and saying, no, I'll take it from here and I'll tell you who I am. And that's really where the work begins, right? Is deciding this is who I am and I'm going to be consistent.
Hmm. Wow. And I guess you have a career that is not very normal, and and I would be interested to understand, well, what is what is this part of you just described that went through all these stages, and what has changed with you? Have your values changed, or are they the same? And how have you been able to live them in ministry and then in the business world and now back to become an author? So how does that shape out for you?
I think for me, it's a journey, which is probably for everyone else. If I think of I grew up on that small cattle ranch, and my parents had the message like, you have to go to university. Like, if you did not go to university, you were like letting down the family. So I went to university, but I couldn't find anything I wanted. And so I said, I'm going to take a year off and travel the world. And my parents warned me, if you do that, we will stop paying and you're going to be on your own. And I was like, I don't care. I'm doing this. And so I traveled to Australia and a bunch of places with a bunch of my friends. But it was there, getting out of that environment I had been raised in. That's when I had this epiphany. I know what I want to do with my life. I want to make movies. I want to become a film director. So I went back home and I told my parents I'm going to become a film director. I got to move to this other university. And they're like, you can't do that, right? Because small town mentality, you can't do that. That's for people in Los Angeles. And so I went to a new school to become a film director. And that's where I started attending church, and they offered me a job, and I really liked helping people. And so suddenly I'm doing that. I had no plans of ever doing that. So I started this career in ministry. Again, over time, that feeling of like, what am I doing here? Then I've sort of followed John Maxwell's path where I started teaching leadership in the corporate world. So to your question about have my values changed, I don't think my values have changed. They've just been able to express themselves in different environments. And but when I first went from ministry into working in the corporate world, I had so many fears, so many imposter syndrome fears. I thought I got to hide my past. I got to hide, because if they knew I was just, kind of the lowly preacher, then what do I have to say? And, it's funny as I look back now because ministry is probably the ultimate place to cut your teeth about what it means to be a leader, because you do have to lead all these people. Most of them you're not paying, and so you have to really learn how to move people. And I would say the best stuff I teach now on that I'm known for comes from those years, right? Really learning people. So my values haven't changed. At least I don't think they have, but how they're expressed, of course, is going to look different.
Okay. And where on your mountain are you? Is the top the final destination, or how does that play out?
The problem with the top of every mountain is you get up there and then time for a picture, and now it's like get back down, and then what's next? And I know it's cliche, but it's really is all about the journey. It's about the climb. And the call to climb is about that. It's this idea of, hey, you're meant for more. Like, you're meant for more, and your inner life seeks to express itself fully. And the magic you bring to the world, like, for you, Christine, the magic you bring to the world is the fullest expression of Christine, right? It's like all of us have one song that we bring to the world that no one else brings. But if we don't bring it, the world doesn't get to hear it. And so how do we bring it? By being the most authentic and honest version of ourselves. And that is not an easy task, because not everybody is going to like that version of you.
Hmm. And it brings up a lot of fears in ourselves.
Absolutely.
Wow. So if you could go back to meet your younger self and ask him a question or tell him something, what would you say?
I would say so many things, but they would center around this. I would say, listen, you need a small group of close friends. And then outside of that, you're not here to make friends. Use your gifts to serve other people, and don't worry about what people think of you. And the last thing I'd say is you have to go all in on you, right? That's what this life is about. Of course, that doesn't mean you're not giving and you're not serving and you're not making a difference. In fact, that's how you make the difference. When I say go all in on you, I mean from a belief standpoint, that you just need to believe in you. And one of the mantras that I will use from time to time is just, I believe in me. I have those bad days, and that I'm thinking, how am I going to make this work? How am I going to do this? I just come back to that mantra. I believe in me. I'll figure it out. And that sort of resets me, and off I go. So that's what I would say. hey, believe in yourself, kid. And don't get so hung up when people don't like you. It's not a big deal. They weren't going to go to your funeral anyways, so go live your life.
Wow, that's very powerful. And for our listeners, what would you say is the very, very first step they can make even today to start climb their mountain?
Start to ask yourself the question, what do I want? And don't be stressed if you don't have an answer. In fact, what you could even do is every day for 30 days, take 5 minutes and just free write, what do I want? And take your answers after a month, throw them into AI and ask what patterns do you see? But start to get clear about what is it that you want, and don't feel guilty for whatever it is you want. Don't judge it. Just start there. But if I can throw in a second thing, go and climb something. Just do something that's difficult, because it's in that all of our, not all, but some of the resistance begins to come up, and now we can deal with it, right? It's on the mountain where we grow. So just find a mountain and get climbing.
Yeah, we have to strengthen our muscles by climbing, not by thinking about it.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Well, James, I could go on forever with you. Thank you so much for coming on the show here. And I am very curious to get your book once it's out. Do you want to share when it will be released and how we can get it?
The book comes out August 5th, so that's coming up very quickly. Of course, you can order it now. You can pre-order it. And if you pre-order, there's a bonus for people who pre-order. And the bonus is I take you through all of the hidden sort of Easter eggs and symbolism in the book that a lot of people might miss. Christine, you've already been catching so much of it. But if you're the kind of person that you love kind of that extra stuff, then make sure you pre-order the book. Go to iwillclimb.com, and you can order it there.
Wow. And I certainly will climb. Thank you so much, James.
Thanks, Christine.
Thank you.
This was Lead Well. Now, what is the one thing that you're taking away from this episode? Please share in the comments below, and do share the podcast with your friends and family, but only if you like it.